Part 1, let's go get started on our Christmas tree rag quilt. But first, always remember to share this so it will save to your profile and you can find it when you're looking for it again later. I started out with 55 5-inch by 10-inch squares and 10 5-inch by 5-inch squares. I guess 5 by 10 is actually a rectangle. But anyway, I started out with 55 for the front, 55 for the back, 10 5-inch by 5-inch for the front, 10 5-inch by 5-inch for the back. I put 2 layers of flannel in between my pieces. I have tons of scrap flannel, mostly because the little ladies, all they slept with when they were little were flannel blankets. And if I told y'all we had more than 100, it wouldn't be an exaggeration. So now they're outgrowing them. I'm cutting them up, using them in things that are sentimental to them, including this. So I have tons of scrap flannel. If you don't have scrap flannel, you can use batting. If you're going to use polyester batting, that's the hairier kind of stuff, you definitely want to cut it about 1 inch smaller than your pieces. So 5 by 5, you would have a 4 by 4 piece of batting. 5 by 10, you would have a 4 by 9 piece of batting because you don't want that hairy hanging out the edges. Now let's get started doing the first part of our Christmas tree rag quilt, y'all. This is so stinking cute. Now I put 2 layers of flannel in between all of my pieces, but you can use fleece, cotton batting, whatever you have, or you can use less than 2 layers. That's totally up to you. The first thing we're going to do is take all of our pieces. We're going to take our front piece, 2 layers of flannel, and I'm using a bunch of scrap flannel, so some of mine has prints on it, but I don't care. If you care, then don't use it. Use something that's solid. And this is my back piece. I'm going to lay my back piece face down, my flannel in the middle, and my front piece face up. I'm going to sew an X on each one of these blocks. That's the first thing we're going to do. Straight stitch, back stitching when you start and when you stop, because my grandma said so. If you have never sewn a single thing in your entire life, a rag quilt is what you need to do because they're super beginner friendly, very easy, all straight lines, and you can make them just as creative as possible. Now I'm using cotton on the front and cotton on the back and flannel on the inside, but you can use all flannel. You don't have to use the cotton on the front and back. I just wanted these prints, and these prints came from a layer cake. I just took a 10-inch by 10-inch stack of squares and cut them in half, and that's what I'm using. Now I'm making this brick pattern, and I told y'all they were 5 by 5, but they're not. They're 5 by 5.5. I'm so sorry about that because you need the 1/2 inch for the seam allowance so that your rows come out the same. I'm making 4 rows for the top of my quilt and 6 rows for the bottom of my quilt, and in between my rows I'm going to put 1 wider strip with Christmas trees because y'all, I'm so proud of these templates that Missouri Star Quilt Company has created from my art, and I'm using those for the center of this quilt. But I have some students who are making rag quilts and they're not doing Christmas. They're doing something they can use all year, like flowers or birds or something like that. So you don't have to do Christmas, although it is mighty cute. HometownQuiltCompany.com, my website, has a ton of appliques. And if you don't want the appliques quite as big as I made them, just reduce the size when you print, and then you can have whatever size you want. We've sewn them all together. Now, I want you to go lay yours out like you want yours to look. I'm going to lay mine out, and I'll be right back. I'm back. Here's the first row we're going to sew. My row is going to look like this. So I picked them all up. Now, I'm going to take my first piece and my second piece, and I'm going to put them back sides together. So my pretty side is on the outside. I'm going to stitch right here. Now, it's a straight stitch. You're going to back stitch when you start and when you stop, but I am going to make mine a little wider than 1/4 inch. If I only make it 1/4 inch, then when I clip it, I'm going to have to go back and re-sew the whole thing back together because of all the holes I'm going to have. This is what I have. See that raw seam right there? It's pretty on the back. That's what I want mine to look like. Now you're gonna have your raw edge on either side of your quilt, whatever side you want. I'm gonna take my next piece and I'm gonna lay it back sides together so the pretty sides are on the outside, and I'm gonna sew it the same way. And then I'm gonna sew the other 3 pieces on. I have 10 rows total. 5 of my rows are 6 pieces that are 5-inch by 10-inch, and 5 of my rows are 7 pieces. It starts with a 5.5 by 5-inch piece, and then there are 5 by 10-inch pieces, and then it ends with a 5-inch by 5.5-inch piece. Okay, I've sewn this row, and I've sewn this row. And do we see how the first row starts with the 5 by 10, the second row starts with the 5 by 5? That's what's going to give us the brick pattern. You just want to make sure that every other row starts with your 5 by 10 and every other row starts with your 5 by 5. So we have these 2 rows sewn. Now we're going to put them together just like we did our individual pieces. Pretty sides on the outside, We're going to straight stitch down this side.
But if you're a beginner and this is confusing at all to you, just use the same size squares or rectangles, whatever it is you choose.
I've sewn these 2 rows together. Now I'm going to sew the 3rd row together. Same way, pretty sides on the outside. Straight stitch, a little wider seam.
Because if you're using the same size squares, then it won't matter. All of your seams will line up. It'll be perfect, I promise. And be sure to email me a photo of your finished project.
We've sewn these 3 rows together. Now we're going to sew a 4th row together. We're going to do it the same way. Pretty sides on the outside. And you see, 5-inch square, 10-inch square, 5-inch square, 10-inch square. You want to make sure that every other square that alternates is smaller, larger. If you want this brick pattern. If you don't want the brick pattern, do it any way you want. Continue sewing your rows together the way that you like them. I'm finished with mine. I've sewn these 4 rows together, and I've sewn these 6 rows together. In between my 2 rows, I'm going to put a strip of these precious Christmas trees. So meet me right back here, and we'll make these Christmas trees and add them to our rag quilt. My name is Tammy. I'm your favorite sewing teacher, and I would love for you to come sew with me.